Mohammed bin Salman, revolution or dictatorship? The most controversial leader in the Middle East. Part 1, Early Life and Education. Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, widely referred to as MBS, was born on August 31, 1985 in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, into the prestigious and powerful House of Saud. His birth marked an important addition to the ruling family of Saudi Arabia, as he was the seventh son of King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, who would later ascend the throne, and the eldest son of his father's third wife, Fahda bint Falah Al Hithlain. His mother came from the Al Hithlain clan of the Ajman tribe, a historically significant and respected tribe within the Arabian Peninsula. His maternal lineage further strengthened his position within Saudi Arabia's political and tribal networks. Being born into the royal family, Mohammed bin Salman was destined for a life of prominence, privilege, and influence. From the moment of his birth, his life was meticulously shaped by the traditions of Saudi aristocracy, which emphasized loyalty to the ruling family, an unwavering commitment to Islamic principles, and a deep understanding of Saudi governance and political affairs. His father, Salman bin Abdulaziz, was a towering figure in the Saudi government, serving as the governor of Riyadh Province for over 5 decades, and later rising to the throne as King of Saudi Arabia in 2015. As a result, Muhammad was raised in an environment where politics, governance, diplomacy, and leadership were fundamental aspects of daily life. A childhood in the palace, grooming for leadership, growing up in a privileged but structured royal environment, Mohammed bin Salman was surrounded by strict protocols, cultural traditions, and political discussions, all of which played a vital role in shaping his worldview. As the son of one of the most powerful Saudi princes at the time, he had unparalleled access to elite decision-makers, foreign dignitaries, and leading scholars, giving him a front-row seat to the workings of Saudi Arabia's governance. Unlike many of his royal relatives, who spent significant parts of their childhood abroad, Muhammad was educated entirely within Saudi Arabia, which allowed him to develop a profound connection with the kingdom's culture, values, and social dynamics. Even as a child, he exhibited signs of intelligence, discipline, and ambition. Family members and palace staff observed that he displayed an interest in strategic discussions, governance, and leadership from an early age. He often accompanied his father to government meetings, official events, and diplomatic gatherings, observing the complexities of statecraft firsthand. This exposure gave him an intimate understanding of Saudi Arabia's internal and external affairs, something that would later play a crucial role in his leadership style. Despite being a member of the royal family, Muhammad's childhood was marked by a relatively strict and disciplined upbringing, particularly under the guidance of his father, who was known for his pragmatic and administrative approach to governance. King Salman was keen on instilling in his children a sense of responsibility, work ethic, and adherence to Saudi traditions. Muhammad was not merely a passive observer of his father's political journey. He was encouraged to engage in discussions about governance, diplomacy, and Saudi Arabia's role in the world. Education, developing the foundations of leadership. Mohammed bin Salman's formal education began in elite Saudi Arabian institutions, where he was given a rigorous academic curriculum focused on Islamic studies, Arabic literature, history, science, mathematics, and governance. Unlike some of his royal counterparts who pursued their early education in Western institutions, Muhammad remained within Saudi Arabia, receiving an education deeply rooted in Arabian traditions and Islamic values. From an early age, he demonstrated a strong aptitude for strategic thinking and decision-making. His teachers noted that he was particularly skilled at analyzing complex problems, debating political theories, and understanding economic principles. His keen interest in history, law, and governance led him to pursue higher education in these fields. Upon completing his early schooling, Mohammed bin Salman enrolled at King Saud University, one of the most prestigious and respected universities in the Arab world. He chose to study law, a discipline that would later serve as the foundation for many of his political and legal reforms. While pursuing his bachelor's degree in law, he exhibited an unwavering dedication to academic excellence, ultimately graduating second in his class. This academic achievement was significant, as it demonstrated not only his intelligence, but also his discipline and commitment to his studies, shaping his worldview, studies in law and governance. While at King Saud University, Mohammed bin Salman immersed himself in legal and political studies, gaining deep insights into Sharia law, constitutional frameworks, international law, and governance structures. His time at university played a crucial role in shaping his political ideology, particularly his views on the role of the monarchy, economic development, and modernization. Unlike many Saudi elites who sought Western-style education, Muhammad's legal education was firmly grounded in Islamic jurisprudence, allowing him to develop a deep appreciation for Saudi Arabia's traditional and religious legal systems, while simultaneously exploring ways to modernize governance. Beyond academic pursuits, Muhammad was also known for his curiosity about global affairs and international relations. He actively followed geopolitical developments, economic trends, and diplomatic strategies, often engaging in debates with professors and fellow students about the future of Saudi Arabia in the changing global landscape. His exposure to diverse perspectives, particularly on globalization, energy policies, and regional conflicts, allowed him to develop a forward-thinking and strategic mindset. During his university years, he also became interested in economic policies, trade, and business development, all of which would later become central themes of his Vision 2030 initiative. His studies led him to explore economic diversification, financial policies, and investment strategies, recognizing the urgent need for Saudi Arabia to reduce its dependence on oil and modernize its economy. Early steps into leadership and public service. While Mohammed bin Salman was still completing his studies, he began to take on responsibilities beyond the classroom. Given his status as the son of a powerful Saudi prince, he was granted access to government offices, policy discussions, and high-level meetings. He started attending key government sessions, learning firsthand about the country's political machinery, legal frameworks, and economic policies. Unlike some members of the royal family who relied on their lineage for positions of power, Muhammad was determined to prove his capabilities through hard work, strategic thinking, and an understanding of governance. Even before officially entering politics, he took on informal advisory roles, offering insights on legal matters, governance policies, and economic reforms. His father, recognizing his son's potential, began entrusting him with increasingly significant responsibilities, allowing him to contribute to governmental and business-related initiatives. During this time, he also developed an intense work ethic, often spending long hours studying case laws, analyzing governance models, and learning about the intricacies of the Saudi economy. Unlike other royal family members who prioritized leisure, luxury, and personal wealth, Muhammad demonstrated a relentless focus on work, governance, and national development. This dedication to learning and leadership would later define his aggressive approach to reforming Saudi Arabia. The making of a future leader. Mohammed bin Salman's early years were crucial in shaping his personality, ambitions, and political trajectory. His strict upbringing, disciplined education, and exposure to governance at a young age made him deeply conscious of Saudi Arabia's political, economic, and social challenges. By the time he graduated, he had already positioned himself as an emerging force in the Saudi political landscape. His early experiences allowed him to develop a sharp political acumen, a strong grasp of economic policies, and a deep knowledge of Saudi Arabia's governance structures. With a clear vision for the future and an unyielding ambition to modernize the country, Mohammed bin Salman was now prepared to embark on a political career that would rapidly elevate him to the pinnacle of power. Part 2. Early Career and Political Ascent. Introduction. Stepping into the political arena. After completing his formal education at King Saud University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in law, Mohammed bin Salman quickly transitioned from academia into the political and governmental spheres. His move into public service was not unexpected. As the son of a powerful prince and a future king, his destiny was closely tied to Saudi Arabia's ruling establishment. However, unlike many royal family members who pursued ceremonial or symbolic roles, Muhammad was determined to actively shape the future of Saudi Arabia. While some of his contemporaries chose military service, diplomatic postings, or luxurious business ventures, Muhammad opted for a path of direct political engagement and governance. His early career was marked by a relentless drive to consolidate power, build a strong network of political allies, and implement policy changes that would eventually lead to his meteoric rise within the Saudi political hierarchy. First steps into government, a trusted advisor to his father. In 2009, at the young age of 24, Mohammed bin Salman officially entered Saudi politics when he was appointed special advisor to his father, Prince Salman bin Abdulaziz, who was at the time the governor of Riyadh Province. This position was far more than a ceremonial appointment. As a senior advisor, Mohammed had direct access to his father's decision-making process and was tasked with handling important administrative, legal, and economic issues within Riyadh Province, the most influential region in Saudi Arabia. During his tenure as his father's advisor, Mohammed played a key role in overseeing major developmental projects, infrastructure expansions, and economic initiatives within Riyadh. He became actively involved in urban development and modernization projects, legal and economic policy formulation, business regulations and investment frameworks, diplomatic engagements with foreign investors. His performance in these roles showcased his strategic thinking, leadership abilities, and organizational skills. Unlike many members of the royal family who preferred a detached role in governance, Muhammad was known for direct involvement in decision-making. One of his major contributions during this period was his work in streamlining bureaucratic procedures and attracting foreign investments to Riyadh Province. He was particularly interested in reducing corruption, improving efficiency, and modernizing Saudi governance structures, themes that would later define his national-level leadership. In addition to his advisory role, he also became Secretary General of the Riyadh Competitive Council, where he worked on improving Riyadh's economic standing. Special advisor to the chairman of the board for the King Abdulaziz Foundation for Research and Archives, an organization that focused on Saudi history, governance, and cultural preservation. A member of the Board of Trustees for Albert Society in Riyadh, where he worked on various philanthropic and social welfare programs. Through these roles, Muhammad gained valuable insights into public administration, economic planning, and national governance, preparing him for higher responsibilities in the near future. Ascending the political ladder, deputy crown prince and ministerial roles. By 2011, the political landscape of Saudi Arabia was undergoing significant changes. The Arab world was witnessing the Arab Spring, a wave of political uprisings and protests that led to the fall of several governments. Though Saudi Arabia remained politically stable, the leadership was closely monitoring regional developments. This was also a crucial year for Mohammed bin Salman's ascent. In October 2011, Crown Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz passed away, leading to a reshuffling of Saudi Arabia's leadership structure. With this transition, Prince Salman, Mohammed's father, became the second deputy prime minister and minister of defense. As his father's influence grew, so did Mohammed's responsibilities. During this period, Mohammed bin Salman was appointed as his father's private advisor. His influence expanded, and he gained access to national security matters, defense policies, and high-level political decisions. His father increasingly relied on him for counsel, and he became one of the closest figures within Salman's inner circle. His rapid ascent continued in March 2013, when he was appointed chief of the Crown Prince's Court after Saud bin Nayef Al Saud was appointed governor of the Eastern Province. This role placed him at the heart of decision-making within the Saudi monarchy, making him one of the most powerful young figures within the kingdom. In April 2014, Mohammed was elevated further when he was appointed Minister of State. This official ministerial role gave him more authority and influence over Saudi policies and governance. It was becoming increasingly evident that he was being groomed for an even greater position of leadership. The turning point: King Salman's ascension and the appointment as defense minister. The defining moment in Mohammed bin Salman's rise to power came in January 2015 when King Abdullah passed away. Following his death, Muhammad's father, Salman bin Abdulaziz, ascended the throne, becoming the new king of Saudi Arabia. This transition significantly reshaped Saudi Arabia's leadership structure. Within hours of Salman becoming king, Mohammed bin Salman was appointed as the new Minister of Defense, a remarkable rise for someone only 29 years old at the time. His appointment made him one of the youngest defense ministers in the world. His new role as Minister of Defense placed him in charge of overseeing Saudi Arabia's military operations, handling national security and defense strategies, coordinating with regional and global military alliances. One of his first actions as defense minister was leading Saudi Arabia's military intervention in Yemen. He played a key role in launching the Saudi-led coalition against the Houthi rebels in March 2015, an operation that would have long-term consequences for the region. Beyond his role as defense minister, Mohammed was also appointed Secretary General of the Royal Court, Chairman of the Council for Economic and Development Affairs, CEDA. This meant that, in addition to military affairs, he now had direct control over Saudi Arabia's economic planning and development programs. Mohammed bin Salman's meteoric rise. Between 2009 and 2015, Mohammed bin Salman's rise in Saudi politics was extraordinary. Within just a few years, he transitioned from a young advisor in Riyadh Province to becoming one of the most powerful men in Saudi Arabia. His appointment as Minister of Defense and Chairman of CDE signaled his dominant role in shaping the kingdom's future. His rapid ascent was no accident. Unlike many Saudi royals who took a passive approach to leadership, Mohammed actively pursued power, developed strong alliances, and established himself as a forceful and ambitious figure within the monarchy. With his father as king, Mohammed bin Salman's influence was only beginning to reach its peak. In the coming years, he would take bold, controversial, and transformative actions that would redefine Saudi Arabia's political, economic, and social landscape. Part 3. Consolidating Power and Becoming Crown Prince. The Ascension of King Salman, a new chapter for Saudi Arabia. The year 2015 marked a pivotal shift in Saudi Arabian leadership with the passing of King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud on January 23rd. His successor was Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, who had served as Crown Prince, Deputy Prime Minister, and Minister of Defense. Upon assuming the throne, King Salman immediately reshaped the power structure within the kingdom, and at the center of these changes was his son, Mohammed bin Salman. Upon Salman's ascension, his son was quickly appointed to multiple key positions. On the very same day, Mohammed bin Salman was named Minister of Defense and Chief of the Royal Court, putting him in direct control of Saudi Arabia's military apparatus, strategic decision-making, and day-to-day governance affairs. He was also appointed as Chairman of the Council for Economic and Development Affairs, CEDA, a powerful policy-making body responsible for steering Saudi Arabia's economic future. The rapid consolidation of power by Mohammed bin Salman was unprecedented in the modern history of Saudi Arabia. While previous leaders had ascended through gradual political maneuvering over decades, Mohammed moved swiftly, solidifying his control over critical aspects of Saudi defense, economy, and governance in a matter of months. His appointment as Deputy Crown Prince in April 2015 further indicated that he was being positioned as the kingdom's next leader. Minister of Defense, a trial by fire in Yemen. One of Mohammed bin Salman's first major tests as Minister of Defense came just 2 months after his appointment, in March 2015, when Saudi Arabia launched a military intervention in Yemen against the Houthi rebels. The war, branded as Operation Decisive Storm, was aimed at restoring the internationally recognized Yemeni government, led by President Abdrabbu Mansur Hadi, and pushing back Houthi forces, which had taken control of Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. The campaign was heavily promoted by Mohammed bin Salman, who presented it as a necessary military operation to counter Iran's growing influence in the region, as Tehran was believed to be backing the Houthis. However, what was initially planned as a swift military operation soon turned into a prolonged and devastating conflict. The Saudi-led coalition, which included the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, and other allies, conducted intense airstrikes across Yemen. While the campaign was intended to weaken the Houthis, it also resulted in thousands of civilian casualties, widespread famine, and one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. As the chief architect of the war, Mohammed bin Salman faced significant criticism from international human rights organizations and foreign governments. The war dragged on far longer than anticipated, and despite heavy Saudi investment in the conflict, the Houthis remained entrenched in key parts of Yemen. By 2017, the war was increasingly seen as a costly military and political quagmire. Nevertheless, Mohammed's aggressive foreign policy approach solidified his image as a decisive leader in Saudi Arabia. His supporters applauded his bold stance against Iran, viewing him as a strong nationalist willing to defend Saudi interests at all costs. However, his critics saw him as an inexperienced ruler who had led Saudi Arabia into an unwinnable war. The ouster of Muhammad bin Nayef, becoming crown prince. By 2017, it was clear that Mohammed bin Salman had positioned himself as the most powerful figure in Saudi Arabia, second only to his father, King Salman. However, standing in his way was Crown Prince Muhammad bin Nayef, his older cousin, who was next in line for the throne. Muhammad bin Nayef had long been a respected figure in Saudi politics, particularly for his role in counterterrorism efforts and national security. However, as Mohammed bin Salman consolidated his control over defense, the economy, and key government ministries, his power began to eclipse that of the crown prince. In June 2017, a highly orchestrated political maneuver unfolded within the Saudi royal palace. Under King Salman's orders, Mohammed bin Nayef was stripped of his titles as crown prince and minister of the interior, effectively ending his career in government. Mohammed bin Salman was then officially declared crown prince, making him heir to the Saudi throne. The move was unprecedented in Saudi history, as it marked the first time that a sitting crown prince was deposed in favor of a younger successor from the same generation. While the Saudi government portrayed the transition as smooth and consensual, reports later emerged suggesting that Mohammed bin Nayef had been placed under house arrest and forced to relinquish power. The removal of Mohammed bin Nayef was a watershed moment in Saudi politics. It signaled the complete consolidation of power by Mohammed bin Salman, who now stood as the undisputed leader of Saudi Arabia's next generation. With his rise to crown prince, he effectively became the de facto ruler of the kingdom, as King Salman gradually delegated more executive powers to him. Centralizing authority, the 2017 Saudi purge. With his position as crown prince firmly established, Mohammed bin Salman launched an unprecedented crackdown on Saudi political and business elites. In November 2017, he orchestrated a mass purge of powerful royal family members, government officials, and billionaire business figures, detaining over 200 prominent individuals at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh. The purge was officially framed as an anti-corruption campaign, with Mohammed bin Salman declaring war on financial misconduct within the kingdom. However, many observers believe that the purge was a calculated move to eliminate political rivals and further consolidate power. Among the high-profile figures arrested were Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, one of Saudi Arabia's richest businessmen and a global investor; Prince Mutaib bin Abdullah, head of the National Guard and son of the late King Abdullah; Adel Fakeh, Minister of Economy and Planning; Bakr bin Laden, chairman of the Saudi bin Laden Group. The detainees were subjected to interrogations, asset seizures, and alleged mistreatment. Reports later surfaced that some of them were forced to sign over billions of dollars in exchange for their release. The Saudi government claimed that over $100 billion in assets were recovered through this anti-corruption initiative. While Mohammed's crackdown sent shockwaves through the Saudi elite, it was widely supported by the younger generation of Saudis, who saw him as a reformer cleaning up a corrupt system. His popularity soared among younger Saudis, particularly those who saw him as a visionary leader capable of modernizing the kingdom. Conclusion: the rise of Saudi Arabia's most powerful crown prince. By 2018, Mohammed bin Salman was firmly in control of Saudi Arabia, having dismantled rival factions, centralized power, and positioned himself as the driving force behind the kingdom's future. As Crown Prince, he embarked on ambitious economic, social, and foreign policy reforms, which would soon reshape Saudi Arabia's role in the global arena. However, his rise was not without controversy. His authoritarian approach, foreign policy decisions, and crackdowns on dissent drew international criticism. Despite this, he remained one of the most influential leaders in the Middle East, setting the stage for Saudi Arabia's transformation under his rule. With Vision 2030, a bold initiative to diversify the economy and reduce dependence on oil, Mohammed bin Salman set his sights on a new era for Saudi Arabia, one defined by economic reform, social modernization, and an aggressive foreign policy. Part 4, Vision 2030 and Domestic Reforms, a bold vision for Saudi Arabia's future. By 2016, just a year after Mohammed bin Salman was appointed as Deputy Crown Prince and Minister of Defense, he was already shaping the trajectory of Saudi Arabia's future. With his rise to Crown Prince in 2017, he took full control of economic planning, social reforms, and modernization efforts. His most ambitious project, Vision 2030, was officially launched in April 2016 as a comprehensive plan to transform the kingdom's economy, society, and governance. Vision 2030 represented a radical departure from Saudi Arabia's traditional economic model, which had been almost entirely dependent on oil revenues for decades. With the world gradually shifting towards renewable energy, Mohammed bin Salman recognized that Saudi Arabia needed to diversify its economy to secure long-term stability. His plan aimed to reduce oil dependency, foster innovation, expand the private sector, and create a more open and dynamic Saudi society. The strategy, as outlined by Vision 2030, focused on three main pillars: a vibrant society, expanding cultural, entertainment, and tourism industries to enhance the quality of life for Saudi citizens; a thriving economy, reducing reliance on oil, promoting non-oil industries, encouraging foreign investment, and fostering entrepreneurship; an ambitious nation, strengthening government efficiency, developing a robust legal system, and boosting national identity. While many in Saudi Arabia embraced the ambitious reform plan, others remained skeptical about whether such a deeply conservative kingdom could undergo rapid transformation. Regardless, Mohammed bin Salman pushed forward aggressively, determined to reshape Saudi Arabia's image on the global stage. Economic reforms, reducing oil dependency, and boosting investment. Saudi Arabia has historically relied heavily on crude oil exports, with petroleum accounting for more than 80% of government revenues. However, recognizing that the global economy was shifting away from fossil fuels, Mohammed bin Salman prioritized economic diversification. Key economic reforms under Vision 2030 included Saudi Aramco IPO. One of the most controversial and ambitious elements of Vision 2030 was the initial public offering, IPO, of Saudi Aramco, the state-owned oil company. Mohammed bin Salman aimed to sell a small percentage of Aramco to raise billions of dollars for Saudi investment projects. The IPO launched in December 2019, raising $25.6 billion, making it the largest IPO in history. However, critics argued that the sale was rushed and lacked transparency. Development of NEOM. One of Mohammed bin Salman's most futuristic projects was the announcement of NEOM, a $500 billion megacity planned to be built on Saudi Arabia's northwest coast, extending into Jordan and Egypt. NEOM was envisioned as a high-tech hub powered by artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and advanced robotics, positioning Saudi Arabia as a leader in technological innovation. Expansion of tourism. As part of efforts to attract foreign investment and boost economic growth, Saudi Arabia introduced tourist visas for the first time in 2019, allowing visitors from 49 countries to explore the kingdom. The government also launched the Red Sea Project, a luxury tourism initiative aimed at turning Saudi Arabia into a global travel destination. Investment in renewable energy. Saudi Arabia, under Mohammed bin Salman's leadership, invested billions in solar and wind energy projects. In 2018, he signed a deal with SoftBank to build the world's largest solar power project, valued at $200 billion. Privatization of key sectors. Vision 2030 aimed to privatize parts of the economy, including healthcare, education, and infrastructure, reducing the government's financial burden and creating opportunities for private businesses. Despite bold initiatives, Saudi Arabia still remains dependent on oil revenues, and critics argue that the kingdom has been slow to transition away from petroleum-based industries. Social reforms, changing the face of Saudi society. One of the most striking aspects of Mohammed bin Salman's rule has been his push for social reforms, breaking away from Saudi Arabia's rigid conservatism. Under his leadership, the country saw sweeping changes in cultural norms, gender roles, and public entertainment. Empowering women, breaking decades of restrictions. Saudi Arabia has long been known for its strict rules on gender segregation and limitations on women's rights. However, under Mohammed bin Salman, several long-standing restrictions were lifted. Women gained the right to drive, 2018. One of the most symbolic reforms was the lifting of the driving ban on women in June 2018. For decades, Saudi Arabia was the only country in the world where women were prohibited from driving. The move was celebrated internationally and was seen as a step toward gender equality. Weakening the male guardianship system, 2019. For years, Saudi women were required to seek permission from male guardians, fathers, brothers, or husbands, to travel, work, or even seek medical treatment. In August 2019, new laws were introduced allowing women over 21 years old to obtain passports and travel freely without a male guardian's approval. More women in the workforce. As part of Vision 2030, Mohammed bin Salman pushed for greater female workforce participation. By 2023, women made up 37% of the workforce, a sharp increase from 19% in 2016. Despite these progressive changes, Saudi Arabia still faces criticism for ongoing repression of women's rights activists, many of whom were arrested for campaigning for these very freedoms. Entertainment, culture, and sports. A new era. For decades, Saudi Arabia had strict social restrictions that banned cinemas, concerts, and public entertainment events. However, under Mohammed bin Salman's reforms, the country underwent a cultural transformation. Cinemas reopened 2018. After 35 years, Saudi Arabia lifted its ban on movie theaters, allowing international and local films to be screened. Concerts and music festivals. Saudi Arabia hosted music festivals, comedy shows, and major international concerts, featuring artists like David Guetta, Nicki Minaj, and BTS. Hosting global sporting events. The country began hosting international sporting events, including Formula One Grand Prix, WWE wrestling matches, and heavyweight boxing tournaments. Saudi Arabia also made historic bids to host FIFA tournaments. Introduction of mixed gender spaces. For the first time, men and women were allowed to attend concerts and sporting events together, breaking the rigid gender segregation rules. Mohammed bin Salman's cultural reforms aimed to make Saudi Arabia more attractive to global investors and tourists, but they also faced resistance from conservative factions within the country. Crackdowns on dissent, balancing reform and repression. While Mohammed bin Salman positioned himself as a modernizer, he also waged an aggressive crackdown on dissent. Many journalists, activists, and opposition figures were imprisoned for criticizing government policies. 2017-2019 crackdown on women's rights activists. Even as women gained new freedoms, activists like Falah Al Hithlain, who campaigned for these rights, were arrested and jailed. Arrests of religious clerics and scholars. Many conservative religious figures who opposed social reforms were detained. The killing of Jamal Khashoggi, 2018. One of the biggest international scandals under Mohammed bin Salman's rule was the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. The killing drew global condemnation, with many accusing the crown prince of ordering the assassination. While Saudi Arabia marketed itself as a reforming nation, its strict repression of critics, activists, and opposition voices led many to question whether these reforms were truly aimed at greater openness or simply consolidating power. A nation in transition. By 2023, Mohammed bin Salman had dramatically reshaped Saudi Arabia, pushing through economic and social reforms that were unthinkable just a decade earlier. However, his leadership remained controversial. While he modernized the economy and expanded freedoms, he also concentrated power, cracked down on dissent, and silenced critics. As Vision 2030 moves forward, Saudi Arabia faces a crucial crossroads. Will it fully transition into a modern, diverse economy, or will old political and economic structures hold it back? Part 5. Foreign Policy and Regional Influence. Saudi Arabia's aggressive foreign policy under Mohammed bin Salman. As Crown Prince and de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, has pursued a bold, assertive, and sometimes controversial foreign policy. Unlike previous Saudi leaders who followed a cautious and traditionalist approach, Mohammed bin Salman has actively reshaped Saudi Arabia's regional and international role, making the kingdom a more assertive and influential player in global politics. His foreign policy approach has been characterized by increasing Saudi Arabia's regional dominance in the Middle East, strengthening ties with global superpowers, including the United States, China, and Russia, countering Iran's influence through military interventions, diplomatic efforts, and proxy conflicts, expanding Saudi Arabia's global economic partnerships beyond oil, attracting foreign investments and modernizing the kingdom's global image. While Mohammed bin Salman's foreign policies have bolstered Saudi Arabia's influence, they have also sparked controversy, drawn criticism, and created diplomatic tensions. The war in Yemen, a costly and prolonged conflict, one of Mohammed bin Salman's first and most significant foreign policy decisions was leading Saudi Arabia's military intervention in Yemen. In March 2015, shortly after he became Minister of Defense, Saudi Arabia launched Operation Decisive Storm, a military campaign against the Iran-backed Houthi rebels who had overthrown Yemen's internationally recognized government. Objectives of the Saudi intervention: restore the government of Yemeni President Abdrabbuh Mansur Hadi, which had been forced into exile; push back the Houthis, whom Saudi Arabia viewed as an Iranian proxy group; prevent Iran from gaining a strategic foothold in Yemen, which borders Saudi Arabia to the south; demonstrate Saudi military strength and Mohammed bin Salman's leadership. Initially, MBS promised a quick and decisive victory, but the war soon turned into a prolonged and costly conflict. By 2023, the war had resulted in over 150,000 deaths, including thousands of civilians. One of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with famine and disease spreading. A stalemate as the Houthis continued to hold significant territory despite Saudi-led airstrikes. Heavy financial costs for Saudi Arabia, with billions spent on military operations. International backlash and calls for peace. The Saudi-led airstrikes in Yemen drew global condemnation as thousands of civilians were killed, including women and children. Human rights organizations accused Saudi Arabia of war crimes, and several Western countries suspended arms sales to Riyadh. In 2022 and 2023, under international pressure, Saudi Arabia engaged in peace talks with the Houthis, facilitated by Oman and the United Nations. While a ceasefire was reached, Yemen remained unstable, and Saudi Arabia's failure to secure a decisive victory weakened its regional standing. Despite this, the war cemented Mohammed bin Salman's reputation as a bold and aggressive leader, willing to use military force to protect Saudi interests. Saudi-Iran rivalry, a shift from conflict to diplomacy. For decades, Saudi Arabia and Iran have been locked in a bitter geopolitical and religious rivalry, competing for dominance in the Middle East. Under Mohammed bin Salman's leadership, Saudi Arabia initially took a hardline stance against Iran, intensifying regional tensions. Key Saudi-Iran conflicts under MBS include Yemen War, 2015-present. Saudi Arabia intervened militarily to counter Iran-backed Houthis. 2017 Qatar crisis. Saudi Arabia accused Qatar of aligning with Iran, leading to a diplomatic blockade. Syria conflict. Saudi Arabia funded anti-Assad rebel groups, while Iran backed the Syrian government. Attack on Saudi oil facilities, 2019. Iran was accused of launching missile and drone attacks on Saudi Aramco oil facilities, briefly cutting Saudi oil production by 50%. However, by 2023, MBS changed course, opting for diplomatic engagement with Iran. Saudi-Iran Diplomatic Agreement 2023. In March 2023, Saudi Arabia and Iran restored diplomatic relations in a historic agreement brokered by China. This shocked the international community, as it marked a major shift in Saudi foreign policy. The deal included reopening embassies in Riyadh and Tehran, ending Saudi support for anti-Iran groups, potential cooperation in regional security efforts. This agreement reduced tensions in the Middle East, signaling that Mohammed bin Salman was willing to use diplomacy when necessary. The Qatar crisis and regional power struggles. In June 2017, Saudi Arabia, along with the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt, imposed a blockade on Qatar, accusing it of supporting terrorism and being too close to Iran. Saudi Arabia cut diplomatic ties, shut down air, land, and sea borders, and demanded that Qatar end relations with Iran and shut down Al Jazeera. However, the blockade failed to bring Qatar to submission. Instead, Qatar strengthened its relations with Turkey and Iran. The crisis damaged Saudi Arabia's reputation, as Western allies viewed the blockade as unnecessary aggression. Kuwait and Oman refused to participate, signaling divisions in the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC. In January 2021, under U.S. pressure, Saudi Arabia lifted the blockade on Qatar, marking another shift in Mohammed bin Salman's regional strategy. Saudi relations with the United States. Saudi Arabia has historically been a close ally of the United States, but under Mohammed bin Salman's leadership, relations have been complex and sometimes strained. Strong relations under Trump, 2017 to 2021. When Donald Trump became U.S. president in 2017, he formed a close alliance with MBS. Trump supported Saudi arms purchases worth billions, Mohammed bin Salman's anti-Iran stance, the Yemen war, the Saudi-led blockade of Qatar. Trump also defended MBS after the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018, despite international outrage. Tensions under Biden, 2021 present. When Joe Biden took office, he criticized MBS for human rights violations, including the war in Yemen, crackdowns on activists, the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Biden also stopped U.S. arms sales for offensive use in Yemen and refused to deal directly with MBS. However, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the U.S. sought Saudi help in stabilizing oil prices. Despite tensions, Biden visited Saudi Arabia in July 2022, signaling a pragmatic reset in relations. Expanding ties with China and Russia. Under Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia has diversified its global alliances, strengthening ties with China and Russia. China. In 2022, China brokered Saudi-Iran reconciliation. Saudi Arabia increased trade with China. MBS considered selling oil in Chinese yuan, challenging U.S. dollar dominance. Russia. Despite Western sanctions, Saudi Arabia cooperated with Russia on oil production through OPEC+. MBS refused to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, maintaining good relations with Putin. This shift signaled a move towards multipolar diplomacy, reducing Saudi Arabia's dependence on the U.S. A new era of Saudi foreign policy. Under Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia has transformed into an assertive and independent regional power. His foreign policy has been bold, unpredictable, and sometimes controversial, reshaping Saudi Arabia's role on the global stage. While he has strengthened Saudi influence, his aggressive tactics and human rights controversies have drawn global criticism. However, his diplomatic shifts with Iran, Qatar, and China suggest that he is willing to adapt his strategy to maintain Saudi Arabia's dominance. As Saudi Arabia prepares for Vision 2030, Mohammed bin Salman's foreign policy decisions will continue to shape the Middle East and beyond. Part 6. Authoritarianism, Human Rights Issues, and Crackdowns on Dissent. The Rise of an Authoritarian Leader. While Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, has been hailed as a modernizer and reformer, he has also been widely criticized for authoritarian governance, systematic repression, and human rights abuses. His leadership has been defined by a paradox. On one hand, he has introduced social and economic reforms under Vision 2030, But on the other, he has imposed harsh crackdowns on political dissidents, journalists, human rights activists, and even members of the royal family. MBS has consolidated power in a way that no other Saudi ruler has done in recent history, eliminating rivals and silencing critics, both inside and outside the kingdom. His rule is marked by the suppression of free speech, arresting and imprisoning activists, intellectuals, and social media users critical of his policies. The use of mass surveillance, employing advanced technology to monitor citizens, journalists, and even foreign governments. Authoritarian control over all branches of government, neutralizing traditional power sharing within the royal family. Extrajudicial actions and assassinations, targeting exiled dissidents, including the infamous murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. While Saudi state media portrays MBS as a visionary leader, international organizations, Western governments, and human rights groups have described his leadership as highly repressive, brutal, and intolerant of dissent. Crackdown on political opponents and rival royals, the 2017 Saudi purge, eliminating rivals in the royal family. One of Mohammed bin Salman's most dramatic power moves was the 2017 mass purge of Saudi elites, which took place under the guise of an anti-corruption campaign. In November 2017, just months after he became crown prince, Saudi authorities arrested over 200 royal family members, businessmen, and government officials, detaining them at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh. Among those arrested were Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, a billionaire investor and one of the richest men in the world, Prince Muhammad bin Abdullah, head of the Saudi National Guard and son of the late King Abdullah, Adel Fakai, Minister of Economy and Planning, Bakr bin Laden, chairman of the Saudi bin Laden Group. Tactics used during the purge. Reports later revealed that the detainees were tortured, forced to sign over billions in assets, and subjected to coercion. Saudi officials later claimed that more than $100 billion was recovered in financial settlements, but many Western governments and human rights groups described the purge as a power grab rather than a legitimate anti-corruption effort. While the Saudi public initially supported the crackdown, believing it targeted corrupt elites, it soon became clear that MBS was using the campaign to eliminate rivals and strengthen his grip on power. The 2020 Royal Purge. In March 2020, just before the COVID-19 pandemic, Mohammed bin Salman launched another crackdown, this time targeting high-ranking members of the royal family. Among those arrested were Prince Mohammed bin Abdulaziz, brother of King Salman and seen as a potential alternative ruler. Prince Muhammad bin Nayef, the former crown prince, who had been removed in 2017. Prince Nawaf bin Nayef, another influential figure in the royal family. The arrests effectively ended any internal royal opposition to MBS's rule. Many senior royals were placed under house arrest, and those who resisted were imprisoned or forced into exile. By 2023, Mohammed bin Salman had complete control over Saudi politics, having sidelined any remaining challengers within the royal family. Repression of human rights activists and journalists, arrests of women's rights activists. Despite lifting the driving ban on women in 2018 and weakening the male guardianship system, Mohammed bin Salman continued to crack down on women's rights activists. In May 2018, Saudi authorities arrested more than a dozen prominent women's rights activists, many of whom had campaigned for the right to drive. The detainees included Lujan al-Hathlul, one of Saudi Arabia's most well-known activists, Iman al-Nafjan, a blogger and women's rights advocate, Aziza al-Youssef, a former university professor and activist. These women were held incommunicado for months, and reports emerged that they were subjected to torture, electric shocks, and sexual abuse. Some were later released under travel bans, but others remained in prison. Saudi authorities justified these arrests by accusing the activists of collaborating with foreign enemies. But international human rights organizations condemned the detentions as politically motivated. The assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, a global scandal. Perhaps the most infamous human rights violation under MBS's rule was the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Who was Jamal Khashoggi? Khashoggi was a prominent journalist and columnist for the Washington Post who had become an outspoken critic of Mohammed bin Salman's leadership. In exile in the United States, he regularly criticized Saudi repression, human rights violations, and crackdowns on dissent. The murder inside the Saudi consulate. On October 2, 2018, Khashoggi entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, to obtain documents for his upcoming wedding. He never came out. Soon after, reports surfaced that a 15-member Saudi hit squad, directly linked to MBS's inner circle, had killed Khashoggi inside the consulate, dismembered his body with a bone saw, and disposed of the remains. The global outrage and CIA report. The murder sparked international outrage, with Western governments demanding justice. In November 2018, the CIA concluded with high confidence that Mohammed bin Salman had personally ordered Khashoggi's assassination. Saudi Arabia initially denied any involvement, then later claimed it was a rogue operation. In December 2019, a Saudi court sentenced 5 individuals to death for the killing, but the trial was widely seen as a cover-up, as no senior officials were held accountable. Despite the scandal, Mohammed bin Salman faced few long-term consequences, as Saudi Arabia's economic and strategic importance deterred Western governments from taking stronger actions against him. The use of surveillance, digital repression, and extrajudicial targeting. Under Mohammed bin Salman's rule, Saudi Arabia has used advanced digital surveillance tools to monitor citizens, activists, and critics both inside and outside the country. Pegasus spyware and global hacking operations. Saudi authorities have been accused of using Israeli-made Pegasus spyware to hack the phones of Saudi dissidents and opposition figures. Foreign journalists, including those working for major news outlets. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon and owner of the Washington Post. This high-tech repression allows the Saudi government to track, intimidate, and silence critics, often before they can even publish dissenting opinions. Targeting Saudi exiles. Many Saudi dissidents living abroad have reported threats, coercion, and even assassination attempts. Saad al-Jabri, a former Saudi intelligence official exiled in Canada, claimed that MBS sent a hit squad to kill him in 2018, shortly after Khashoggi's murder. Several Saudi dissidents in Europe and the US have been placed under heavy security protections due to credible threats from Saudi agents. An iron grip on power. By 2023, Mohammed bin Salman had completely reshaped Saudi Arabia's power structure, centralizing absolute control over the government, military, economy, and society. While he has modernized the economy and expanded social freedoms, he has also created a deeply repressive regime where dissent is silenced through surveillance, imprisonment, and extrajudicial killings. His rule presents a paradox. He is hailed as a reformer by some, but condemned as a ruthless authoritarian by others. As he moves toward Vision 2030, the question remains, will he embrace true reform, or will his repression only deepen? Part 7, Saudi Arabia's Economic Transformation and Vision 2030 Progress. The need for economic transformation. For decades, Saudi Arabia's economy has been heavily dependent on oil revenues, with petroleum exports accounting for over 80% of government income. However, by the mid-2010s, fluctuating oil prices, the global push for renewable energy, and the threat of long-term economic stagnation forced the Saudi leadership to recognize the need for economic diversification. Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, as Crown Prince and de facto ruler, launched Vision 2030 in April 2016, an ambitious reform program aimed at reducing oil dependency, modernizing Saudi Arabia's economy, and positioning the country as a global business hub. Vision 2030 set 3 main objectives: diversifying the economy, reducing reliance on oil exports, and developing new industries such as tourism, technology, entertainment, and renewable energy. Expanding private sector participation, encouraging foreign and domestic investments, and reducing the government's role in key industries. Enhancing the quality of life, developing social and cultural infrastructure, boosting employment, and improving overall living standards. Since its launch, Vision 2030 has been one of the most ambitious economic reform programs in the world, with mixed results. While Saudi Arabia has made significant progress in certain areas, Other aspects of the plan remain unrealized due to political challenges, economic setbacks, and global uncertainties. Privatization and economic diversification. One of MBS's main economic strategies has been to privatize key sectors and open Saudi Arabia's economy to global investors. His government has reduced state control over various industries while promoting new sectors such as entertainment, sports, and tourism. Saudi Aramco IPO, the largest public offering in history. As part of his push for economic transformation, MBS announced the partial privatization of Saudi Aramco, the state-owned oil giant. In December 2019, Saudi Aramco launched its initial public offering, IPO, raising $25.6 billion, making it the largest IPO in history. However, the IPO fell short of its initial expectations. While MBS initially sought a $2 trillion valuation, the final market value was closer to $1.7 trillion. International investors were reluctant due to concerns over government control, transparency, and geopolitical risks. The IPO was largely backed by Saudi and regional investors, limiting its global impact. Despite these challenges, the Aramco IPO generated significant capital, allowing the Saudi government to fund Vision 2030 initiatives and invest in non-oil industries. NEOM, the $500 billion futuristic megacity. One of Mohammed bin Salman's most ambitious projects is NEOM, a futuristic high-tech city planned for Saudi Arabia's northwest region. Announced in 2017, NEOM is envisioned as a smart city powered by artificial intelligence, robotics, and renewable energy. The project aims to attract tech startups and multinational corporations, innovators in renewable energy, biotechnology, and automation, luxury tourism and entertainment industries. Key features of NEOM, the line. A 170-kilometer-long city with no roads, no cars, and zero carbon emissions. Oxagon, a floating industrial complex designed to be the largest in the world. Trojena, a mountainous luxury ski resort, planned to host the Asian Winter Games in 2029. Despite its bold vision, NEOM has faced major obstacles, including slow construction progress, high costs projected to exceed $500 billion, environmental concerns and forced displacement of local tribes, skepticism from investors over feasibility. While NEOM remains central to Vision 2030, its completion and success remain uncertain. Developing the tourism and entertainment industries. Under Vision 2030, MBS has sought to make Saudi Arabia a major global tourism destination, reducing its reliance on religious tourism, Hajj and Umrah, and oil revenues. Key tourism initiatives. Introduction of tourist visas, 2019. For the first time in history, Saudi Arabia allowed tourists from 49 countries to visit. The Red Sea Project, a luxury tourism and resort destination along the Red Sea, aimed at attracting high-net-worth individuals. Diriyah Gate Project, a cultural and heritage development in Riyadh, showcasing Saudi Arabia's history and traditional architecture. Expansion of events and festivals, hosting Formula One, Grand Prix, WWE, boxing matches, and international concerts. By 2023, Saudi Arabia's tourism industry had grown significantly, attracting millions of non-religious visitors. However, challenges remain, including cultural restrictions, regional instability, and competition from other Gulf states like Dubai and Qatar. Investment in renewable energy and sustainability. While Saudi Arabia remains the world's largest oil exporter, MBS has prioritized developing renewable energy sources, recognizing that oil revenues will decline in the future. Key renewable energy initiatives. Saudi Green Initiative, a commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2060. Investment in solar and wind energy, aiming to generate 50% of Saudi Arabia's energy from renewables by 2030. World's largest solar project, a $200 billion partnership with SoftBank to build a massive solar farm. Despite these efforts, Saudi Arabia still heavily relies on oil exports, and many renewable projects have faced delays. Challenges and criticisms of Vision 2030. While Vision 2030 has brought significant economic changes, it faces several obstacles. 1. Slow progress on diversification. Despite major investments, Saudi Arabia's economy remains dependent on oil revenues. The private sector is not growing fast enough to replace government spending. 2. Foreign investor concerns. Human rights violations, including the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, have damaged Saudi Arabia's global reputation. Many international investors remain hesitant to do business in Saudi Arabia due to political instability and legal uncertainties. 3. Unemployment among young Saudis. While MBS has pushed for job creation, youth unemployment remains high, with many preferring government jobs over private sector roles. The Saudization policy, which requires companies to hire more Saudi citizens, has led to job shortages for expatriates and slowed certain industries. 4. Social resistance from conservatives. While many young Saudis support Vision 2030, religious conservatives oppose cultural and social changes. The entertainment industry expansion and mixed gender spaces have sparked backlash from traditionalists. Aburani, geopolitical risks. The war in Yemen, tensions with Iran, and diplomatic conflicts with the U.S. have created uncertainty for investors. Security concerns related to Houthi missile attacks on Saudi infrastructure threaten economic stability. The future of Vision 2030. As Vision 2030 approaches its halfway mark, Mohammed bin Salman has achieved significant milestones, including expanding entertainment, sports, and tourism industries, launching major infrastructure projects, the NEOM, the Line, Red Sea project, opening Saudi Arabia to global investment, introducing social reforms to improve quality of life. However, he still faces major challenges, including over-reliance on oil revenues, slow job creation for young Saudis, skepticism from foreign investors, political repression damaging Saudi Arabia's global image. Whether Vision 2030 succeeds or falls short will determine Saudi Arabia's economic future and Mohammed bin Salman's legacy as a leader. Part 8. Saudi Arabia's role in global geopolitics and diplomacy. A shift in Saudi Arabia's global standing under Mohammed bin Salman. Under Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, Saudi Arabia has radically transformed its foreign policy, shifting from a traditionally cautious and U.S.-dependent state to an assertive, independent, and globally influential power. While previous Saudi rulers relied on soft diplomacy and behind-the-scenes negotiations, MBS has pushed the kingdom into an era of direct intervention, military assertiveness, and economic diplomacy. His foreign policy is defined by strategic diversification, strengthening ties with China, Russia, and emerging economies, while balancing relations with the United States and Western allies. Military assertiveness, leading regional conflicts, particularly in Yemen and against Iran-backed militias. Economic power projection, using Saudi Arabia's oil dominance and investment funds to influence global markets. Soft power and diplomacy, hosting global events, investing in sports, and expanding international tourism. This bold foreign policy approach has expanded Saudi Arabia's global influence, but also created diplomatic tensions and regional rivalries. Saudi Arabia's relations with the United States, a complex and changing alliance. For decades, Saudi Arabia and the U.S. shared a strong alliance, primarily based on oil trade, military cooperation, and regional security. However, under MBS, the relationship has become more complex, shifting between close cooperation and diplomatic tensions. 1. The Trump era, strong support and business-first diplomacy, 2017-2021. Under President Donald Trump, Saudi-U.S. relations flourished. Trump's first foreign trip was to Saudi Arabia, 2017, signaling strong ties between the two nations. Massive arms deals worth over $100 billion were signed. The U.S. supported Saudi Arabia's military intervention in Yemen. The Trump administration defended MBS after the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, despite global outrage. During this period, MBS and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner developed a close relationship, helping facilitate business and diplomatic ties. 2. The Biden era, a strained relationship, 2021 present. When Joe Biden took office, relations soured due to Biden's criticism of Saudi Arabia's human rights record, The release of a CIA report blaming MBS for Khashoggi's murder. U.S. efforts to re-enter the Iran nuclear deal, which Saudi Arabia opposed. Saudi refusal to increase oil production during the Ukraine crisis, leading to U.S. frustration. However, by 2022, geopolitical realities forced Biden to engage with Saudi Arabia, leading to Biden's visit to Riyadh in July 2022, despite earlier pledges to make Saudi Arabia a pariah. Ongoing U.S.-Saudi defense cooperation, including arms sales and security agreements. Despite policy disagreements, the strategic partnership between the two nations remains intact, with both sides recognizing their mutual need for economic and security cooperation. Strengthening ties with China, a new strategic partner. Under Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia has dramatically increased its engagement with China, marking a major shift in global alliances. Key Saudi-China developments. China became Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner, with annual trade surpassing $87 billion by 2023. Saudi Arabia joined China's Belt and Road Initiative, securing major infrastructure investments. In March 2023, China brokered the Saudi-Iran diplomatic agreement, a historic moment in Middle Eastern geopolitics. MBS hosted Chinese President Xi Jinping in Riyadh, December 2022, strengthening military and technological partnerships. Saudi Arabia is also considering selling oil to China in yuan instead of dollars, a move that could undermine the US dollar's dominance in global oil trade. By aligning with China, MBS is reducing Saudi Arabia's dependence on the US, while securing economic and technological benefits. Saudi-Russia relations, a strategic energy partnership. Despite global tensions over Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Saudi Arabia has maintained strong ties with Moscow, particularly in the energy sector. Key developments in Saudi-Russia relations, OPEC+. Coordination. Saudi Arabia and Russia have coordinated oil production cuts, influencing global oil prices. Refusal to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Unlike Western allies, Saudi Arabia has avoided direct criticism of Russia. Military and defense cooperation. Saudi Arabia has increased arms deals with Russia, including discussions on advanced weapon systems. While Saudi Arabia continues to work with the U.S., its energy cooperation with Russia signals a shift toward a more independent foreign policy. The Saudi-Iran rivalry, from conflict to diplomacy. For decades, Saudi Arabia and Iran have been regional rivals, competing for dominance in the Middle East. Under MBS's leadership, this rivalry initially intensified, but by 2023, diplomatic relations were restored. 1. Military confrontations, 2015-2021, Yemen War, Saudi Arabia fought against Iran-backed Houthi rebels. Attack on Saudi oil facilities, 2019. Iran was accused of launching missile strikes on Saudi Aramco. Regional proxy conflicts, Saudi Arabia and Iran clashed in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. 2. Diplomatic breakthrough, 2023. In a surprising shift, Saudi Arabia restored diplomatic ties with Iran in March 2023, with China acting as a mediator. Key elements of the deal: embassies reopened in Riyadh and Tehran. Saudi Arabia ended its military campaign against Iran-backed groups in Yemen, increased economic and security cooperation. While Saudi-Iran tensions remain, this agreement reduced the likelihood of direct conflict and marked a shift toward regional stability. The Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, and regional politics. As the largest economy and most influential country in the GCC, Saudi Arabia plays a dominant role in shaping regional policies. 1. The Qatar diplomatic crisis, 2017-2021. In 2017, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt imposed a blockade on Qatar, accusing it of supporting terrorism and aligning with Iran. The blockade severely impacted GCC unity. Qatar strengthened its ties with Turkey and Iran. In 2021, MBS ended the blockade, restoring relations with Qatar. 2. Relations with the UAE. While Saudi Arabia and the UAE are close allies, tensions have emerged over oil production disputes within OPEC, competition over regional business dominance, diverging views on regional conflicts. Despite occasional economic and political disagreements, The Saudi-UAE alliance remains strong. Saudi Arabia's growing role in Africa, South America, and Asia, MBS has expanded Saudi Arabia's influence beyond the Middle East, strengthening ties with emerging economies. 1. Africa. Saudi Arabia has invested billions in African infrastructure and energy projects, increased diplomatic engagement with African Union members, support for counterterrorism efforts in the Sahel region. 2. South America strengthened oil and economic partnerships with Brazil, Argentina, and Venezuela, hosted the first Saudi-South American Business Summit. 3. Asia deepened trade ties with India, Pakistan, and Southeast Asian nations. Saudi Arabia joined BRICS Plus, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa in 2023, enhancing its global economic influence. A new Saudi foreign policy doctrine. Under Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia has transitioned from a U.S.-dependent kingdom to an independent global player, balancing relations with the U.S., China, Russia, and emerging economies. Strengthened regional diplomacy. Saudi-Iran deal, Qatar reconciliation. Diversified economic partnerships, China, Russia, India, Africa. Increased global soft power, hosting sports, investing in tourism and entertainment. However, challenges remain. U.S. tensions over oil and human rights, geopolitical risks, Iran, Yemen, and regional conflicts. Balancing alliances without alienating key partners. Embas's bold foreign policy moves will shape Saudi Arabia's global role for decades to come. Part 9. The future of Mohammed bin Salman's leadership and legacy. The unchallenged leader of Saudi Arabia. As of 2025, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, stands as the undisputed leader of Saudi Arabia, wielding more centralized power than any previous ruler in modern Saudi history. Since being appointed crown prince in 2017, he has systematically consolidated authority, sidelined rivals, and reshaped the kingdom's domestic and foreign policies. His rule is characterized by a paradox. He is seen by many as a modernizing reformer, while others view him as a ruthless autocrat. His leadership has transformed Saudi Arabia's economy, society, and global standing, yet it has also been marked by crackdowns on dissent, human rights abuses, and aggressive geopolitical moves. As he prepares for the eventual transition to king, his legacy will depend on whether he can fully implement his vision for the country while managing internal and external challenges. The road to kingship. When will MBS become king? While King Salman remains the official ruler of Saudi Arabia, his age and declining health have led MBS to effectively govern the country as its de facto leader. Several scenarios could shape MBS's official ascension to the throne. King Salman's natural passing. Given that King Salman is in his late 80s, MBS is widely expected to succeed him within the next few years. A voluntary abdication. There has been speculation that King Salman could formally step down, allowing MBS to take over earlier. A smooth or controversial succession. While MBS has eliminated most royal opposition, the transition will still be closely watched by both Saudi elites and the international community. Given his iron grip on power, it is highly likely that MBS will officially become King of Saudi Arabia before 2030. The future of vision, Nanyongsi 30, will it succeed? One of the most defining aspects of MBS's leadership is Vision 2030, the ambitious plan to modernize Saudi Arabia's economy and society. As the 2030 deadline approaches, many question whether it will succeed or fall short. Successes so far. Tourism boom. Millions of non-religious tourists have started visiting Saudi Arabia. Expansion of entertainment and sports. Hosting Formula One, boxing, WWE, and music festivals has reshaped Saudi's global image. Social liberalization. Women have gained more rights, and cultural restrictions have relaxed. Massive infrastructure projects. Projects like NEOM and the Line have generated international attention. Challenges and uncertainties. Saudi Arabia is still heavily reliant on oil. Non-oil industries have not grown fast enough. Foreign investor skepticism. Many companies hesitate due to Saudi Arabia's human rights record. Delays and unrealistic goals. Some projects, like NEOM, are years behind schedule and over budget. While Vision 2030 may not fully meet its ambitious targets, it is reshaping Saudi Arabia in fundamental ways, ensuring that MBS's economic and social reforms will have lasting effects. Political future. Will MBS reform or tighten his grip? Despite modernizing the economy and social freedoms, MBS has ruled with an authoritarian hand, suppressing dissent through mass surveillance and censorship, arrests of activists and opposition figures, targeting exiled dissidents, e.g. the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Possible political futures for Saudi Arabia. Under MBS 1, a more open and reformed Saudi Arabia. If MBS chooses to soften repression, Saudi Arabia could become a more open society. Press freedom and political participation could improve. Human rights reforms could improve relations with the West. 2. A continued authoritarian state. MBS could maintain his current level of control, continuing to arrest critics. Saudi Arabia would remain politically closed, even as social freedoms expand. 3. Internal opposition or future unrest. If economic promises fail to materialize, there could be unrest from unemployed youth. Some royal family members or conservatives could challenge MBS's authority. Increased surveillance and suppression may be used to prevent any future opposition. At this stage, MBS has almost complete control, but his ability to balance power and reform will determine the stability of his rule. Saudi Arabia's place in the world. What comes next? MBS has repositioned Saudi Arabia as a global power, no longer solely dependent on the United States. Moving forward, Saudi Arabia is likely to expand its influence in several key areas. 1. The U.S.-Saudi relationship, strategic but uncertain. While MBS has had difficult relations with the Biden administration, the U.S. still relies on Saudi oil and military cooperation. Future U.S. elections, e.g. a Trump return, could restore closer ties. If tensions increase, Saudi Arabia may shift further toward China and Russia. 2. China and Russia. Strengthening alternative alliances. Saudi-China trade has surged, with China becoming Saudi Arabia's top trading partner. Energy cooperation with Russia has helped stabilize oil markets. However, Saudi Arabia will not completely abandon Western partnerships, preferring to balance multiple alliances. 3. Regional power struggles, Saudi Arabia versus Iran. While Saudi Arabia and Iran restored diplomatic ties in 2023, tensions could flare up again. Iran-backed groups, e.g. Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, still threaten Saudi interests. Saudi Arabia's goal is to maintain regional dominance without direct military conflicts. 4. The future of the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC. Saudi Arabia remains the dominant power in the GCC, but competition with the UAE and Qatar is growing. Riyadh is investing in becoming the leading financial and tourism hub of the Middle East. Legacy of Mohammed bin Salman. How will history judge him? MBS's rule will be judged based on whether he delivers on his promises or if his reign is defined by repression and controversy. Potential positive legacy. Modernize the Saudi economy. If Vision 2030 succeeds, he will be seen as a transformational leader. Expanded global influence, strengthened Saudi Arabia's role in energy, diplomacy, and technology. Improved social freedoms. His changes in women's rights, entertainment, and tourism have permanently reshaped Saudi society. Potential negative legacy, authoritarian rule and human rights abuses. His crackdown on dissent could overshadow his achievements. Economic overpromises. If Vision 2030 fails, his leadership could be seen as overly ambitious, but ultimately ineffective. Long-term instability. If Saudi Arabia faces political or economic crises after his rule, his legacy could be questioned. Ultimately, MBS wants to be remembered as the leader who brought Saudi Arabia into a new era. But whether history sees him as a visionary reformer or a ruthless autocrat remains uncertain. The next decade under MBS. As Mohammed bin Salman prepares for his eventual transition to king, the next decade will determine his ultimate success or failure. His leadership has already reshaped Saudi Arabia, but major questions remain. Will Vision 2030 fully succeed, or will it fall short? Will Saudi Arabia maintain stability, or will authoritarianism lead to future unrest? Will MBS continue balancing global alliances, or will Saudi Arabia shift further away from the West? Regardless of how his rule unfolds, Mohammed bin Salman is already one of the most consequential leaders in Saudi Arabia's history. His decisions will shape not only the kingdom's future, but the entire Middle East.